Hi there, my name is Memo, this is my channel, Houseplanty Goodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion, which you might be able to see around me, it's tropical houseplants. So today I want to talk not so much specifically about a plant, but an accessory or something you can do to help certain plants grow. And if that's not kind of cryptic enough for you, I might as well just tell you. Essentially what I want to talk about today is the concept of using planks instead of support sticks, instead of moss poles, to get your trailing and plants that want to grow up something to grow faster, bigger leaves, more mature leaves in a slower time period, essentially. I found that planks of wood tend to be the best option, really. Let's dive into that, shall we? So the plant that I've got in front of me, it's a relatively juvenile plant still. The main reason why I've got a juvenile plant in front of me is because everything else that I've got on planks is absolutely huge and it's very difficult for me to move. And that is possibly one of the, when you're looking at the pros and cons, that's one of the cons, as in when this type of growing establishes itself, it can be quite tricky to then move things around. But I'm sure if you've got that in mind when you're first setting it up, you'll probably find smart ways around it on how you would set it up. But this is an Amydrium medium blue. So this is the glaucous one. And you can see these were the original, more juvenile leaves that it came with. And that was the first leaf that it grew in my care, purely because it's on a support plank instead of a support pole or even a moss pole. Now let me bring it in a bit closer and hopefully that might focus. Yes, so you might be able to see that it's got the aerial roots that are growing straight onto that board, and I will talk about what I use instead of a plank. And you can see that it's growing quite nicely and the next leaf is coming quite swiftly. I've got a little support stick here because I want to push that front leaf a bit forward, but ignore that for now. The thing that I have found, and let me just preface this by saying you saw that it's not a plank of wood. What I use for my planks of wood essentially is what I find on Amazon as Cork Tiles, and they've got, let me just turn this around so you might be able to see, a sticky back to them, and they've obviously got something to, so you can peel and basically if you're using it as a tile, stick it down on the floor or on the wall. What I do is I will cut that cork to size and then I will peel back this backing. I will put in a support stick because it wouldn't be one of my videos if we weren't talking about support sticks, even when we're not talking about support sticks, just to give it some rigidity. And then I will put that covering back over to stick the support stick essentially onto the cork tile. Now the other thing that you might be able to see, if I bring this in a bit closer, you can see the cork is sitting on the top of the growing media, not in the growing media. And again, just so you can see, the cork is wet. I've just watered this today. I didn't manage to remember not to water my plants today, but you can see that the cork, the benefit that I find with the cork over kind of traditional wood is that there's several things. One, it will last for a bit longer because it can handle that moisture for a bit longer, especially when it's got that support stick. So a lot of other woods, if you are just going to use wood, I would say go for hardwood. Be careful of treated woods because that might leach into your growing media and it might cause problems to the plant. I don't know what chemicals they might use to treat that wood. But with this, I found that it works quite well because it also maintains some of that moisture onto where those aerial roots are attaching. The aerial roots that you will see that attach onto planks of wood, or if you've ever accidentally lent a plant against a wall and you'll see the roots when they start to attach, they start to flatten and they've got this kind of fuzziness to them as well. That is what makes this different from a moss pole. Now again, looking at the pros and cons, the pros of this is it attaches a lot more solidly than it would ever do on a moss pole. Again, the pro for this is the fact that you don't need to keep misting down a moss pole to keep that moisture on the moss pole so that the aerial roots don't dry out. With this, and even on regular wood, which doesn't maintain the moisture for too long, it's interesting because the aerial roots don't need that moisture around them all the time. But also because it attaches, it replicates what it's doing in nature. So for instance, in nature, a lot of these plants would attach to the side of a tree or a bark. Again, that's where the wood kind of comes into play. And they would latch onto that. And essentially they would then grow taller. And because they've got that good support on there, it's almost like glue. It then means that those leaves have got something to support themselves and they can grow larger and mature much faster. And that's the same thing that goes with a lot of plants that might get fenestrations potentially if they grow taller. I found with this method, the fenestrations come a lot faster. So almost with other plants that you might have on a moss pole or on a support stick, you might get to the 20th, 15th, 20th leaf and you might start seeing some maturity. With, at least in my experience, with planks, I found by the second, third, or even fourth leaf, you're starting to get really mature leaves at that point, as long as it's attached properly. Talking about attaching properly, if you're going to do this and you want to kind of get a plant started, I would highly suggest, I don't think I've done this on this because the roots were already so strong, is getting one of the Velcro plant ties and making sure that it's as snug as possible, that the stem is as snug as possible against that plank or against the cork in this case, and you will give it a bit of a start. Essentially, it's usually going to be around where the node is, and you'll see that there's a couple of aerial roots. Very quickly, it will attach to that. Now, on the con side of things, it attaches very firmly. So a lot of the times, the benefit that you might get with a moss pole is that if the aerial roots have rooted into the moss pole and they've maybe got some secondary roots, sometimes you can just chop the plant off and there's already some established roots that you can then pretty much plant straight away. With this, it's pretty permanent. At that point, if you were to cut that plant off the plank and then try to propagate it, you would probably lose those aerial roots because they would stay attached to that plank rather than the actual plant itself, and you'd need to root it out from scratch. But again, pros and cons. You'll get much more mature leaves, much faster, and the plant generally, I tend to find, tends to be a bit more robust and happier generally. It also doesn't need that constant level of hovering that you would do with a moss pole, where you'd need to kind of like spray it down all the time, make sure that the moisture is there. A lot of people might not be creating their own moss poles, and I can see all these people that are doing moss poles, are self-watering moss poles. I do want to try that at some point. It looks like a cool thing to attempt, but it just seems like an awful lot of work, and I've got way too many plants to be able to deal with that level of commitment for one or two of them. So this for me tends to be a set it and forget it kind of thing. As soon as it attaches and it starts growing, great, you're kind of good to go. And the growth rate is redonkulous on this. I'm looking at the side there. I haven't got that on a pole, or sorry, on a plank, but I have got that against the wall, because I'm okay for that to attach to the wall. I've put a waterproof membrane in between the wall and the plant, so it's attaching to the membrane essentially. But my micans, my Philodendron micans, which usually most people, even when they're growing them up a support stick or a support pole, the leaves don't get much larger. Some of my micans leaves now are probably bigger than my actual hand. So that gives you an indication. Same thing goes for obviously the shingling plants. That's the prime example, and that's what most people would be used to using plants for, is they will get much bigger and much more mature leaves. Obviously, the higher they grow up on that plank or wall in my case. But yeah, I don't want to go into any more detail. I think that's the reality with using a plank, is faster growth, more mature growth, faster, more mature growth, and much more stable plants. Negatives on there, actually one more positive is you don't need to baby it as much as you would do with anything else. Negatives on there, it attaches quite firmly, so it's difficult to then take a cutting and have established roots. You'll need to start from scratch. And obviously making sure that you're getting the right materials. There's a bit of setup to begin with, and it's another thing to kind of get your head around. But I'm not the only one that's noticing this. There's a lot more people that are starting to grow a lot more plants on planks rather than poles or support sticks. And I think there's probably a good reason for that. We're finding some good results when it comes to using planks instead of moss poles and support sticks. It's not suitable in every situation, and it can be a bit tricky about getting it just right. But I thought I'd share with you, hopefully this might be something that you might want to maybe experiment with and see how you get on. I'll give you a bit of a spoiler. I think I'm pretty much everything that I can get on a plank soon. I'll probably move things onto a plank away from even some support sticks. It's going to take me a while, so you won't probably see it happen overnight, but I just see the results speak for themselves, essentially. So I know that if I really want something to get big and mature really quickly, that's the one I want to do. I want to trial with a plank. The next one I think that's probably going to be going on to plant quite soon is my Philodendron melanochrysum, because I know that's one that people struggle with getting the leaves to get larger from the size of when they bought the plant, if that makes sense. If you bought it with juvenile leaves, a lot of people find it very difficult to get it to more mature leaves. And people that have got like semi-mature leaves, if they want to go for a full mature leaf, they really struggle to get it any bigger than what the size that they've got when they bought the plant, essentially. So it's definitely an experiment that I want to run, and I want to see how it goes, essentially. But yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to say. If you've got any questions, comments, by all means do drop them down below. I'd love to have that conversation with you. And yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon. And I truly hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.